What's going on, everybody? Welcome into the second ever video edition of the Round Ball Roundup. I am wearing my favorite team's attire, but this is not just an App State podcast. We are brought to you by the Dogs Media Network, backed by collegefootballdogs.com. Obviously, the football season is still wrapping up. Lots of Sun Belt bowl games, specifically this weekend. I believe there's a bowl game that's still currently on right now as we go about this. Be sure to jump in with your comments, questions, trash talk, whatever you want to do. This is just to have fun with some Sunbelt basketball, get to know the league as a whole a little bit better, and hopefully have some guests on throughout our time. But we do want to also mention that at the bottom of the screen, we do have a brand new sponsor for the show, Dubby Energy. So if you guys are into energy drinks, this one is more like your protein powder. So you would just make your own little scoop. They have a sampler pack they just brought out now with 5 different things in it, 5 different flavors, I should say. It also comes with the Dubby specific shaker. And this is also supposed to be clean energy. So this isn't packed full of all kinds of bad stuff for you. You should be able to use it kind of pre-workout if you're sitting there having a video game session, if you're sitting there watching us on our podcast live streams, whatever the case may be. Dubby Energy is a great place to try and get some of that energy there. No crash afterward. Again, this is all kind of a clean, not packed full of chemicals type of energy drink for you. So be sure to try them out. Give them a like, a follow too on social media, and be sure to enter the promo code below, SB Syndicate. That's Sunbelt Syndicate, SB Syndicate at checkout. That'll help us show our value to them. So we thank them for being a sponsor of the podcast show, the basketball version of the podcast show. We also want to start out by mentioning best wishes to head coach of Old Dominion basketball, Jeff Jones, as unfortunately he did suffer a heart attack, a heart episode at the very least, down there in the tournament in Hawaii, as ODU is playing, I believe, 3 total games while they're over there, which is kind of interesting since Coastal's over there for a bowl game as well. But Jeff Jones, we pray and hope that you make a full recovery here and you and your family get to still enjoy the holidays with each other as you kind of recover from that incident. So we wanted to start off by saying that as well. So last week, we didn't really have a real great plan or schedule of attack, to be honest with you, because it was the first go at this. I wanted to see how much interaction we would have throughout the show and just kind of get into the swing of things as far as getting on here and just making a show for everyone to kind of be a part of. So today we do have something that we want to put up on the screen so that it's a little bit more interesting for everyone to follow along with. So Sunbelt basketball, I'm calling it the holiday review, right? Christmas is right around the corner. A couple teams are playing a few more games here. There are, let's see, I think there's 3 games currently going on tonight, featuring Temple going against Old Dominion, as we mentioned, down there in Hawaii. At the moment, ODU is up 44-33 in that one, so playing well there. Definitely want to probably get that win for their coach and start turning their season around, because ODU was I was taking a chance on ODU being a real big sleeper. And so far at 3-7 currently, that's obviously not looking great. Although, you know, the day I was actually on Two Pointers podcast featuring Trevor Everett, I called that prediction, I guess, on his show live. And as we were looking at it, they were only a few points down to Arkansas on the road against a ranked team in Arkansas, and looking pretty impressive. Obviously, since then, they haven't played up to their standard. And were played up to par, kind of what they did last year. One of the reasons I had them as a sleeper was because they had performed so well all throughout last season. Not all the wins that they would hope to have had, but they played everybody close. I mean, there was hardly any blowouts when they were on the court, and I thought that would really translate. I thought they have a quality coach in Jeff Jones. I thought they had the players. I thought they might have brought in some guys who could help them even further. And as we know, and we talked about last week, this conference lost a whole lot of very talented players. And I think you're going to see that when we start talking about where some of these teams stand before we get into conference play. again, a couple games tonight, I think one game tomorrow, and then conference play starts next Saturday. So there's kind of a big layoff there, right during Christmas and up to New Year's, almost New Year's, I guess I should say, because we start back with conference play on the 30th. And to mention the other games going on right now, we've got Louisiana going up against Rice, performing very well in that one right now, up 30-15. And James Madison, our only ranked team, number 20 still, they took care of Morgan State tonight, 89-75. That game ended up starting, I think, at like 5 o'clock. So that game's done and over with. They already took care of business. They continue to roll on here pretty easily as we look at the conference standings. So here's a look at the conference standings. Let me refresh this screen here because I think my logos will show up better when I do that. Give me just 1 second. Sorry about that. All right, let's get back into the full screen here. There we go. Now everybody's showing up. So obviously, like I said, James Madison, with their victory earlier this afternoon, is sitting at 12-0, ranked number 20 overall in the nation, easily the best team in the Sun Belt as it sits right now. We're going to talk about the standings, obviously, while we've got this up, and then we're going to dive a little bit deeper into some of the top teams. We're not going to go through all the teams tonight, and I'll tell you why specifically. But right now, James Madison, 12-0. App State was looking good, 9-2 going into last night's game against UNC Asheville. This one was a neutral site game down in Hickory, North Carolina, which is about an hour southwestish of Boone itself. So it was off the mountain, kind of neutral site game for both. Big App State contingent. Definitely some Asheville fans there as well, but definitely more App State fans in attendance. They dropped this one pretty soundly, and large part due to Asheville just being able to throw it from anywhere and hit threes. They had a guy who was just on fire. I think someone said at one point they were over 70% from three-point range. Meanwhile, App State at that same time was 1 from 15, and I think they ended up being 1 from 18 or something like that for the night. So not a great shooting night for App State, an amazing shooting night for UNC Asheville, and unfortunately, that's going to lead App to have a loss before they head into conference play, but still sitting pretty there at 9-3 before conference play starts. South Alabama sitting at 7-5, not looking too bad overall. However, when we dive deeper into the schedule, as we will here in a second, or at least the schedule up to now, obviously it's not going to include any of the conference games, not as powerful of a 7-5 record if you consider that all that great, right? It's just a little over 500, but not quite as powerful as it could be if they had performed a little bit better in some of the other games. And obviously, they just don't have the strength of schedule. Cajuns, again, who are taking care of business against Rice right now, sitting at just 6-5. Reminder, this is the Sun Belt champions from last season, not in the regular season. That's actually the team below them in Southern Miss, but the Cajuns took home the crown in the Sun Belt championship game in the Sun Belt tournament, and the team right above them, South Alabama, was the runner-up who got hot at the right point in time last season. So it's not a big surprise to see these three teams near the top, but I think it is a little bit of a surprise, especially for some of the fans of these teams, to see them sitting at 3, 4, and 5 instead of 1, 2, and 3. And so they're going to be battling to get back up there. But all three of those teams had some big losses, and we talked last week about some of the losses for Southern Miss before the season even started. So some of that was going to hit them hard regardless. And luckily for them, all three teams are still on the winning side of things for the moment. But again, they have to continue taking care of business because they're right at the brink there of becoming a 500 team right before conference play starts. So all three of those teams are really going to want to step it up a notch when conference play starts up again on the 30th of December, just before the New Year's holiday. Southern Miss, again, we just kind of wrapped them in, but 6-5, just like the Cajuns. Then we've got some interesting teams here right in the middle, right at 500. That's Texas State, who's kind of been a team ending up the year closer to the top in the past. They had some early season struggles last year with a team that was actually favored to be pretty good going into the season. They ended up, I don't know if I'd say rounding into form quite yet, but they ended up getting a little bit better towards the end of the season last year, and being kind of respectable, but not really ever a dominant force or a team a lot of other teams are going to fear. And even though they had one of the better players in Mason Harrell, on the team. Troy, kind of the same thing, but always dangerous. I feel like where Texas State wasn't really all that dangerous last year, Troy was more dangerous and could definitely go in and beat a lot of teams that people maybe didn't expect them to hang with or compete with. Now, that wasn't true just the other night, as they lost pretty soundly to, I believe it was Ole Miss or Mississippi State. I can't remember off the top of my head, but they did get trounced pretty bad in that one. I had thought previously going into that they might stand a chance to at least cover the spread, which I think was 12.5 points. They weren't even close to that. So unfortunately, Troy, again, also coming in there with the 6-6 record before conference play starts. Georgia State, a team from the past that had been really good, pretty dominant in the Sun Belt, not really a mainstay at the top like we thought they could be. They're sitting at 5-6, just under 500. I think they're really struggling all across the board right here. They're struggling on the court. They're struggling in the stands, which is unfortunate because they just had a brand new facility open up last year, and I've yet to be there. But it sounds like it's a nice place, nice place to watch a game. Obviously, in a hotbed of basketball there in Atlanta. I know there's a lot of competition. You've got Georgia Tech right there, almost literally across the street. So it's always going to be a little bit of a struggle to kind of outdo them, but you would hope that some of the production on the court could get more people in the door. Following that up, we've got ULM sitting at 4-6. ULM, a team that I didn't expect much of anything out of last season. And excuse me here, I just spilled a little bit of water as I'm trying to talk through this and keep from going too dry sounding on air. But ULM, 4-6. Coming off of last season, I actually expected them to be better this point of this season. I just don't think that, again, they've lost a couple guys, but they've never been kind of one of those more dangerous teams like I was alluding to with Troy. Troy kind of, being capable of pulling off upsets and stuff. I think ULM's kind of dangerous in the fact that they can keep some games close that they shouldn't, but they can't get over that benchmark of turning those things into victories. I think that's where they're struggling, and they continue to struggle this year. Now, however, having said that, it was interesting last year that ULM struggled pretty mightily, as did Texas State before conference play started, and then both teams got better as conference play went along, and both teams were definitely able to beat some people that they didn't think outsiders wouldn't have thought they could have beat going in. So the same type of thing could happen this year. I think sans, a couple teams here at the top. I think some of these teams in the middle could jump up. Now, once conference play goes, I don't see a massive difference between some of these teams in the middle. I really think they can make a large jump up if they start playing well come conference time. Speaking of that, I feel the same way about Marshall, who sits at 5-8 currently right now. They lost one of the better players in the conference in Kinley from last season. But they still have Camden Kerfman, who we're going to talk about here in a little bit as well. But they lost a lot. They lost a couple players. They lost Hanlogden down as a transfer to Florida. They're going to need to round back into form. Hopefully they can start doing that before or right as conference play is going to start here, because I think they're a better team than what their record shows, and I think they're going to start to round into form when they get into conference play here. Arkansas State, a team I really thought was going to make a big jump up. They had a lot of injuries coming into the last season or during last season, but when they had a full roster, they were very capable of winning in this league. I thought that would translate more into this season, but unfortunately for them, they're sitting at 4-8, not a good benchmark at all. We'll see if they can turn it around. I have some question marks there because they didn't really explode at any point last year. We'll see if they're capable of doing that this year. Again, Old Dominion, we kind of started off talking about them and everything that they're going through right now with playing a tournament over in Hawaii, as well as what's happening with their coach. Also just struggling on the court. They played James Madison already as a little bit of a benchmark. It was considered a non-conference game. I did have a question on that because it was a weird time. It was like 2 weeks ago, I believe. And so, excuse me here. They already played them. They hosted them, actually. This one was up in Norfolk. And so I thought, these teams don't like each other. It's programs that want to battle hard within the state of Virginia there, not terribly far apart from each other. However, James Madison just took it to him. There wasn't much of a competition in that one, maybe very early before JMU started to outpace them. I believe it was almost like a 30-point game without looking it up. I guess I could look it up here, but it was pretty pretty one-sided. Let's just say that. So not what Old Dominion had hoped to start out the season with. And Coastal Carolina, whose all-time winningest coach has now since retired, and the new guy has taken over, and it hasn't really changed anything just yet. 3-8 on the season, not a good start for the Chants. We'll see if they can also get it turned around. That's a team last year with Mustafa they had down low. I thought was going to be a little bit better than they were. They struggled pretty well throughout the season. Had a couple games where they performed pretty well, but just across the board, I would not have said Coastal Carolina was a team that a lot of people were going to be scared of going into the matchup, and kind of showed towards the end of the season. They kind of fell off there and started pretty similar this season. Georgia Southern, a team we knew was going to have a lot of question marks coming into the season, lost some guys, got a new coach. So we've seen in football, especially with obviously Coach Prime, Coach Kinney down in Texas State, you can make a really quick turnaround in year one if you bring in the right transfers and you've got the right system set up. That kind of thing maybe happened at Georgia Southern, but chemistry is also a huge part of the game of basketball. And thus far, it doesn't look like they've gotten there. I will say, even though they're 0-12, a terrible mark on the season, no one's going to be happy with that. Honestly, even the rest of the members in the conference aren't going to be happy with that, because once you play them, your strength of schedule goes down because they haven't won a game yet. So as much as everyone's, oh, it's hilarious, it's great that they've lost games, and especially on my side here as an App fan, but we needed them to beat some people so that they bring the conference up a bit. This is a conference that's historically been a one-bid league. So far, from what I've seen from this season, it's going to be absolutely true once again. Long way to go. A lot of things can happen, but early outlook is that this is also going to be a one-bid league yet again. Now, having said that, everyone's going to assume like James Madison is the team. Well, a lot of people assume Southern Miss was the team going into the conference tournament last year, and we saw that the Cajuns came out on top, earning that NCAA berth and going up against Tennessee in the first round, putting up a great showing, by the way. Almost pulled off the upset. Great showing there. Unfortunately, they couldn't get that done. But Georgia Southern, going back to them, 0-12, have been playing better as of late, been playing closer games against some decent teams. So it's not like they've been playing better against really bad competition. That's not even what's happening. They're playing better competition towards the bottom of their out-of-conference schedule here, and they are improving. So I do think they're going to start pulling off some wins here in conference. I do think they're still going to end up towards or at the very bottom of the conference. Maybe they could jump up if Coastal continues to struggle, Old Dominion continues to struggle. They can jump up out of the basement there. It's still going to be difficult, but I think they are capable of some wins, maybe some upsets here against some of the other teams kind of in the middle, which they otherwise wouldn't have thought to have been a big part of. All right, so let's jump into this next slide. So we're going to go through some of the top teams. Like I said, we're not going through every single team, and I'll explain why as we get towards the end of the top teams in the conference, because I think these ones are the important ones that we want to go over and why they stand where they stand. This one's obviously the most obvious. James Madison, number 20 in the country. They're big wins, obviously, to start the year at number 4, Michigan State. Huge win, no question, even though Michigan State has not been kind of what they have historically. At the time they won, they were thought to be a very good basketball team, helped put James Madison on the map early this season, and obviously they've continued to stay there because they also beat a team in Radford, which is also located in Virginia. For those that don't know, Radford, not historically amazing, but they have been pretty consistent in basketball throughout the years, and they are sitting at 10-4 right now. So obviously looking back, that Radford win, a big victory for James Madison. That was the same week or weekend that they hosted College Game Day. So a big weekend for JMU sports, keeping that undefeated streak alive in basketball and then having that matchup with App State, even though they did lose that one in football. Wink. Kent State is now sitting at 7-4. Not an amazing record, but up there very close to the top of the MAC as far as out-of-conference schedule is concerned. So again, Kent State, 7-4. They did take 2 overtimes to beat them, but again, good teams find ways to win, and so James Madison is finding ways to win those types of games, even when they're struggling in some other aspects of the game, getting it done on the court. So for bad losses, none. Obviously, they haven't had one, and so pretty simple. Moving on to the next one, We've got Appalachian State, their big wins, and I would put this in order as I have it on the screen. I've got big wins listed as UNC Wilmington, who now sits at 9-2. Not only did they beat them, not only did they beat a 9-2 team, they destroyed them. They went really, really hot in the second half, close game at the half, turned it on in the second half, totally destroyed them in the end. And Wilmington thought to be the favorite come into that game and thought to be one of the best teams in their conference going into the season. So to beat them soundly on the road, it wasn't a home game for App State. 9-2 team now. I'm thinking that's actually their biggest win of the year. Excuse me. Auburn is what a lot of people would say was actually their biggest win. Excuse me, because it was at home. And they're sitting at 8-2, SEC team, been powerful tournament team the past couple of years, thought to be another, excuse me, another good year for Auburn going in. What I saw from Auburn that day wasn't the greatest of basketball. That's not to disparage anything Appalachian State has accomplished, but I just think UNCW was a bigger win than what I saw from Auburn. So I'm considering that one stacked on top. And then ETSU, this was borderline whether I was considering it a big win. I ended up putting it as a big win, even though they're only sitting at 7-4. ETSU themselves don't have any amazing victories. However, I considered it a big win because App State has struggled to beat ETSU historically. ETSU is definitely a pretty good basketball team, usually gets pretty good recruits, but recruits better than App State does historically. So I ended up putting it on the list for that reason. Now, let's jump over to their bad losses because they do have some of those. NIU, Northern Illinois, this is part of the Sun Belt MAC Challenge. They didn't just lose the game. That's the problem here. NIU's only 6-5 on the season, so not a great team to lose to in general. But it was the way that they lost. They got blown out of the gym. It wasn't a close game at all, and they just really never stood a chance in that one. So I'm considering that a bad loss. And then obviously we kind of opened the show talking a little bit about this, but UNC Asheville just last night, only 7-6 on the season, obviously 6-6 last night going into the game. And they just gotten historically hot, and App State was just not. Could they have played better? Could they have gone down low and tried to dominate a little bit more? Sure, they could have tried it. I just don't know. It just seemed kind of whack, after the first few minutes and everyone being really energetic and into it there in Hickory, it just kind of fell off the rails. So they've really got to just take that and use it, though. They can take that and use that in conference play. You obviously want to go in there 10-2 instead of 9-3. It is what it is. You've got to just watch some of that on film, figure out what you did wrong to make it better for next time, and obviously just get a little luckier with how your shots are falling or how the other team's shots are not falling. As far as South Alabama, there was really interesting schedule. So far, their biggest win I would consider is Denver. Again, not a historically great basketball team, but they are sitting at 8-5 towards the top of their conference as far as, again, everyone's really mostly played out of conference games up to this point. But if you had to do the standings, they'd be real close to the top of their conference as it sits. Bad losses. Anybody who's kind of middling around 500, I didn't consider a bad loss unless maybe they got blown out by that type of team. Again, like we just talked about with NIU versus App State. So I don't think South Alabama has any real bad losses except for the very first loss of the season, which was bad, to Mobile. Now, South Alabama is located in Mobile, but Mobile also has a smaller college there as well. It's an NAIA school. So this isn't the top level of basketball that we're talking about here. And great, we've got our Cajun fan back from Wednesday night. Yobi Cars, Cajuns 40, Rice 26 at the half. So that's a great score update. Love to hear that. Hopefully, Cajuns can take care of Rice in basketball, and next week, Texas State can take care of Rice on the football field. So we love to see those results. But going back to the South Alabama game against Mobile, NAIA school, and they lost at home to this team. Now, I did go look at Mobile's schedule. You're not going to know a lot of the other schools on their schedule, but to note they are 10-3, so they're not an awful team by any means. They're a great team, actually, in the NAIA, but when you're South Alabama and you went to the conference championship game last year at the Division I level, and you start off your season with a loss at home to an NAIA school, that's a bad loss. I don't care if you lost by 1 point on a last-second shot. That's a bad loss. That should not be a competition for you. That should be a tune-up, warm-up game. And you went in there and you lost instead. So terrible loss. Really, I could probably change those words from bad loss to terrible loss in that one for South Alabama. Again, they've kind of righted the ship there. Haven't really had any bad losses since then, but it's how they started their season. So obviously going to be considered on that list there. Louisiana, big wins so far. Youngstown State up there in Ohio, they took care of them. And the Penguins of Youngstown State now sit at a 10-3 mark on the season. So a very underrated win when it happened, but looking very good now. Long Beach State, again, this was kind of similar to one of the other games for, I think, App State that I was talking about whether I was putting it on the list. Long Beach State, 8-4, not amazing as far as overall record, but obviously not bad. But really, if you look at who Long Beach State has beaten, is why they get noted here as a big victory for the Cajuns of Louisiana, because their 8-4 record is a little bit stronger than it kind of looks on paper. Although obviously 8-4 looks pretty good no matter what. There's a lot of teams right now that are currently located within the Sun Belt who would love that 8-4 record, because a lot of them don't have anything close to that, and that's probably more of what they were expecting going into the season. Now, bad losses. I have McNeese listed down here. McNeese is sitting, I think, with like 10 plus wins on the season. So why are they considered a bad loss to McNeese? So it's the way that they had lost to McNeese. That's the bad loss. They had 3 players for the Cowboys thrown out of the game, which the Cajuns should have been able to take advantage of, and obviously were not, because they still went down to McNeese. Now, the game was on the road there in Lake Charles, but again, when these types of situations occur, you hope to take advantage. This isn't a team that finished towards the bottom of the Sun Belt trying to hope and beat a team local in McNeese. This was a team that finished the top of the Sun Belt when the Sun Belt tournament was all said and done last year, and they went on the road and lost a very winnable game. So I'm going to consider it a bad loss for that reason, not the fact that going in that them losing would have been considered all that bad with where they stood at the moment going in there. But again, it's really how it happened. That was the bigger deal. And this is going to be the last team we're going to go through kind of big wins and bad losses for. And I'll tell you why in just a second. But Southern Miss, last one up here, big wins. I haven't seen any. I really just haven't seen any big wins out of Southern Miss yet. Part of that is certainly the schedule, which I'll bring up while we're talking about it. They just haven't blown me away with who they've beaten. We'll go through those victories real quick. Will Carey, Xavier, not the Big East Xavier. This is Xavier down in Louisiana. And then also Milwaukee, UAB, Northwestern State, and Lamar. And, when I look at those teams and see who those teams have beaten or what their records are, it's just none of them are impressive. So then I just looked at bad losses. So again, this was kind of teetering. South Dakota State, I'm considering a bad loss because it's a team under 500 from a conference that's not historically all that amazing. And I mean, they're under 500. So again, with where Southern Miss was thought of coming into the season, you can't lose that type of a game. And I believe that one was at home. Let me see if I can bring that back up real quick. Yes. So you're losing at home to a team like that, sandwiched in between some other losses that are maybe questionable. But yeah, you got to rebound and win that kind of a game at home. So I was considering a bad loss for that reason. Now, let's see what the next slide is. I'm kind of forgetting off the top of my head. So we'll go over the top players. But the reason I'm not breaking down every other team is because I got into the routine of starting to put big wins, none, bad losses, none. There was just way too many of that. And let's pull those standings back up because that's the reason why, right? You've got a bunch of teams here at 6-5, 6-6, 5-6, 4-6, 5-8. That's all kind of the same thing. You've got Arkansas State over there at 4-8 as well. probably Old Dominion, Coastal Carolina, Georgia Southern all weren't going to have a single big win. And you're really not going to have any big losses or bad losses because they're not thought of to be very good coming into the game. So if you lose to a team you're supposed to, how do you consider that a bad loss? You could probably put some of those on a bulletin board because fans want to say it's a bad loss, but really on paper, most of these teams towards the bottom aren't coming in as favorites. So not really going to have any bad losses. And a lot of the other teams, like I said, just right there in the middle, it's hard to just put them on a massive scale when they're expected to be about 500. So when you expect that, it's hard to say, you've got any big wins or bad losses to go over. And so I didn't waste time going through a bunch of the same slides for a bunch of the schools. So we will just move on here. And I went a little too far. So top players. I hope you like the holiday theme to this too, by the way. I decided to leave out a lot of the team graphics and have more of a holiday theme. So hopefully we're having fun with that. But we got Yobi Cars coming on saying 0-12 with a shock face. Yeah, see, this is one of the reasons I'm trying to do this show is just bring awareness. I know basketball is not the number one sport in the Sun Belt. It's probably number 3 after football and baseball. So it's not shocking to see that a lot of people don't know these types of things. But 0-12, yeah, really bad mark so far on the season. And as we mentioned before, maybe Southern can start turning it around, but it's going to take some work to do that. Top players. So what I've done, could find the top players for the conference. We'll go over that once conference play really starts rolling when these teams are facing off against each other. Right now, I went into kind of the top 50 listed for each big point total. And to note, we do not have anyone in the top 50 for steals or assists, which is kind of surprising, right? Because we've got guys on a lot of these other lists, as we'll see here, as we'll talk about, but nobody in the top 50 for steals or assists. And I think that's one we struggled in last year as well. We might have had a guy up there in steals, to be honest. And I think by the end of the year, Themis Folks for the Cajuns was up there in assists because he was getting the ball down to Jordan Brown down low quite a bit. And yeah, Sunbelt softball might be ahead of basketball, is what Yobi Carr says. It might be. Maybe I'll have to start looking into softball, but I know nothing about softball, so I'll try and stay away from that. But he's saying also to bring on the baseball. Yeah, I mean, I think once the weather starts to get warm again, I'll be ready for baseball too. I followed baseball really closely in the Sunbelt last year for the first time and really enjoyed it. So if you haven't done that, I suggest you do because I was really starting to be won over by not only my team doing well and having fun with that, but just seeing how much this conference cares about baseball is exciting. Again, that's what we're trying to do here with the basketball. It's just up that ante a little bit and have some more fun with it, get some more involvement in it, and keep up with it. So again, top players, points per game, Kobe Julian down there for Louisiana. He's sitting at number 36 in the country. This is not in the Sun Belt. This is 36 in the country at 19.3 points per game. So incredible talent there in Kobe Julian. However, I'd like to see some more guys on this list, right? We need to up the offense in the Sun Belt overall. And he's telling us now that it is 70 degrees in December. They are ready down there in Cajun country. I bet you are. You guys have a reputation for being really good hosts. Apparently, they do like a big country boil or whatever you call it after the games for the teams down there when they're visiting. I've heard it's a hell of a time. I've been down there for football and seen the hospitality and really appreciate it from the Cajun fans. I'd love to get down there for some baseball and check that out as well. So we've gone over points per game, only one player on the top 50. We do have an improvement when we look at the rebounds as we have John Ojoku. I'm probably butchering that, and I'll get more on watching Coastal Carolina so I can properly pronounce his name. But he's sitting at number 12 in the country at 10.4 rebounds per game. We also have another one, like I said, Nate Martin from Marshall coming in at number 26 with 9.6 rebounds per game. And so we've got some guys down low doing some work. I love to see that. This conference is predicated on defense mostly, playing pretty well. And because of last season, we had some bigs who really excelled at that. We had guys at Louisiana, South Alabama, Marshall, at App State, guys down there blocking shots, which I think is the next one here. Yep, block shots, we've got Brandon Love, who's stepping it up down there at Texas State, tied with Justin Abson from App State at number 6 in the country, both with 2.7 blocks per game. I know it's a weird thing. They're ranked number 6 in the country, both of them. It is only 2.7 per game, but that's just a statistic where you're not going to have 15 block shots a game, right? So it sounds weird to be that high up with just a 2.7, but trust me, even the leaders are kind of lower than big numbers that you're putting up in points per game and assists per game and the like. So these guys are doing a phenomenal job at shot blocking down low for their teams, hopefully leading to more offense. Again, we need to see some more of those guys on those top 50 list. As far as three-pointers go, not a ton of great three-pointers in this conference. Was similar case last year, although Marshall had both Camden Kerfman, who's on the list so far for this season at number 45 with 2.8 per game. But they also had Tavion Kinsley, who was up there making some three-pointers. And I can't remember right now at this point of year last year if we might have even had a third guy from a different team. But again, only one guy barely hanging on to the top 50 there with Camden Kerfman. He's really trying to keep that Marshall team together and rebound into form before conference play starts. So we'll see how this goes. I believe that might be it. Yeah, that's it as far as running over the statistics, wrapping this up. Don't want to keep this thing going too long. Want to keep everybody interested in this and not drag on too much. So I want to wish you and yours a Merry Christmas. Thanks for tuning into this show and participating, especially our Cajun fan there for keeping the comments section alive. Hopefully, as conference play gets going, we can start getting into this even more and excitement starts to build as football dies off a little bit and basketball starts to pick up the pace before we hit baseball season. Again, we've been brought to you by Dogs Media Network, our sponsor down below, W Energy. Please check them out and try a little energy. See if it helps you throughout your day. And yeah, I've got some stuff on order. So as soon as that comes, we'll give you a little review of it too. But they've got a lot of options. Going over their flavors real quick before we get out of here. Calio Cream, Pushing Punch, Big Energy Tears, Beach and Peach, Dragonade, which sounds pretty cool. Galaxy Grenade, also a cool name. I like that one. And let's see, Dub Sludge. It's green, so it's like slime. And they also have Palm Blom Energy and Encounter Cream. Not sure about what those two entail, but some of those other flavors sound very interesting to me. Be sure to give them a like on social media, see what they're all about, and I'll tell you my review once we have it, but definitely check them out. Again, promo code down below, SB Syndicate. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching. We'll see you after the Christmas holiday when we get back in front of the camera and give you some basketball coverage. Thanks for watching, and we'll see y'all next time.